Joining me is Chris Lewis. He is the former commissioner of the OPP and a man who certainly is no stranger to talking statistics and law enforcement. Chris, when you saw these numbers come out by StatsCan regarding violent crime, what were your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I thought was that right across Canada, I'm not surprised that things have gone up. Violent crime used to be a big city issue, and still is, but it's also coming into rural Canada, smaller towns, mid-sized communities, and so right across the country it's increased. When it comes to Toronto, it certainly has increased year to year, but if you look back to 2018 and 2019, the violent crime stats were actually higher in Toronto. So it's actually come down since then, but year to year it has gone up.
Chris, what stood out to me when I went through that report preparing for my interview with you was firearms offenses. And it showed that according to Stats Canada, the handling and storage of firearm offenses has stabilized, but yet the usage, firearms being discharged or used in other criminal offenses has gone up. Does that sort of speak to the Fed's legislation when it comes to wanting to target legal gun owners? Because it would appear, based on those stats, that legal gun owners are abiding by the law when it comes to storage of a firearm and the handling of a firearm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, this has been my concern since Bill C-21 first started to take form, that government is focusing on legal gun owners, and that legal handgun owners are already licensed and have all the background checks, etc., and legal firearm owners that have their PAL and have had training, and that is not the issue. Of course, we also see in Toronto the recent comments by Toronto Police around the fact that only 3% of the firearms seized are so-called legally owned guns in Canada. The rest are smuggled. It's all handguns coming from the U.S. So any legislation that further puts a burden on hunters and people that lawfully use guns and are trained and have all the background checks don't make any sense at all when you look at the actual stats on the ground as to what's happening.
Now, let me ask you about a bill. Again, we've heard the former Justice Minister talk about listening to the concerns of the chiefs of police and wanting to strengthen our bail program. But I would argue, and perhaps you would agree or disagree with me, that there are those the legislation is in place when it comes to bail. We have such thing for repeat offenders, and we have such thing as protection of the public to detain somebody. Now, I understand that the Charter guarantees everybody the presumption of innocence. So I'm curious as to your opinion on this. Do you think that perhaps justices of the peace are reluctant to detain people when they're not convicted because it takes so long from arrest to trial? Do you think if we speed up the whole process, we might get some of these repeat offenders remaining in custody until their trial? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, speeding up the process would definitely be a big help. And you're right in that the ability to hold people is there, but it isn't often applied. We've seen too many cases where gangbangers that have a history of violence are out on bail or some form of release for violent offenses, commit other violent offenses, and are released again. How does that make any sense to anybody, particularly the victims of violent crime? And the police that are constantly under threat from these people. So they need to get tougher. But at the same time, the Liberal government put some policies in place around bail in that they don't want to see people of color and people of First Nations descent held because of disproportionate number of people that are incarcerated of color and Indigenous people. And so then the provisions got loosened a bit there. And it's not about race. It's about whether people are a threat to the community, a threat to police. So let's get tougher on this stuff. At least use the laws that are there and make sure they're applied in a uniform way across this country.